My coworkers thought I was inexperienced until I became their boss. After graduating college, I got my first job at a small office. It was a company that had been around forever, the kind of place where everyone had been working there so long that they had practically become part of the furniture. I was the only new hire in over 5 years, and I was also the youngest person there by at least a decade. From the moment I walked in, it was clear that no one had any faith in me. My manager, Bill, barely acknowledged my existence. He'd been doing things the same way for 20 years and made it clear he had no intention of listening to someone fresh out of college. My coworkers were no better. Linda, who had been in the same role since before I was born, treated me like an intern who needed handholding. Every time I suggested a new way of doing something, she would smile in that condescending way and say, "Oh honey, we have a system that works just fine." The problem was that their system did not work fine. It was outdated and inefficient, and everything took twice as long as it needed to. They were still using spreadsheets that had been created over a decade ago, manually entering data that could have been automated in minutes. It was frustrating to watch, but I knew that if I pushed too hard, they would just write me off as some arrogant kid who thought he knew better than the real professionals. So, I kept my head down and observed. I did my work, learned their processes, and waited for the right moment. That moment came when Bill was panicking over a report that was taking forever to compile. Their system was so outdated that it required multiple steps just to generate a simple summary. I hesitated before speaking up, but finally I said, "I think I can automate that." Bill barely looked at me. "We do things a certain way around here," he muttered, but I could see the frustration in his face, so I asked if I could just show him. He sighed and waved a hand, clearly expecting me to waste his time. It took me 20 minutes to set up a simple automation that did the entire process in seconds. Bill stared at the screen like I had just performed some kind of magic trick. Linda, who had been watching over my shoulder, frowned and said, "Well, I suppose that's convenient." That was the beginning of everything changing. At first, they still brushed me off, acting like I had just gotten lucky, but then I fixed another problem, and another. I streamlined their data entry process, created templates that saved them hours of busy work, and set up automated reports that eliminated the need for manual calculations. The same people who had looked at me like a clueless kid were now hovering near my desk, asking if I had a quick trick to help them out. The biggest shift happened when the CEO, Mr. Collins, happened to walk by and noticed what I was doing. He asked me to show him some of the improvements I had made. I expected him to nod politely and move on, but instead, he scheduled a meeting with me the next day. When I walked into his office, I was nervous. I was still at the bottom of the ladder, and I had no idea what he wanted to talk about. To my surprise, he asked me to walk him through everything I had changed. I explained how I had improved efficiency and cut down on wasted time. He listened carefully, asked questions, and then leaned back in his chair. "I want you to train the entire department on this," he said. That was the moment everything shifted. Suddenly, I was the one leading meetings. Bill, who had once barely acknowledged me, now had to sit through my presentations. Linda, who had dismissed my ideas, was taking notes while I spoke. The same people who had treated me like I was insignificant were now relying on me to teach them how to do their jobs better. A few months later, Mr. Collins announced that the company was restructuring and looking for a new department head. I had assumed they would bring in someone from the outside or promote one of the long-term employees, but when the decision was made, it was me. Walking into my first meeting as their boss was surreal. Bill avoided my eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the shift in power. Linda forced a tight smile, acting as if nothing had changed, but when she needed my approval for something, she hesitated before speaking. "Sir, do you have a moment?" It was subtle, but it was enough. I had gone from being the office newbie to the person they all answered to.